For over 50 years, the traditional marketing agency has been one of the most successful and resilient business models on the planet. But right now, we're seeing a massive structural shift in the underlying economics of this industry. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to calmly and analytically unpack exactly what's happening. We are looking at a fundamental transition, moving away from traditional linear labor models and moving toward modern technology-driven systems leverage. Now, this absolutely isn't about the death of marketing. Businesses need growth more than ever before. Rather, we're documenting the inevitable evolution and, in some ways, the death of the traditional agency business model itself.
To do this, we've broken things down into 5 core sections for you. First, the traditional agency model. Second, the linear scaling limit. Third, 4 forces of transformation. Fourth, the marketing operating system. And finally, the architecture of leverage.
Let's dive right into Section 1, the traditional agency model.
So the traditional formula was honestly incredibly elegant and highly effective. It goes a little something like this. Step 1, you sell your expertise. Step 2, you deliver the work. Step 3, you get paid. And step 4, you simply repeat the cycle. If a business needed a website, a new ad campaign, or fresh branding, they just went out and hired an agency. The agency had the specialized skills that the client didn't. It's a straightforward 4-step cycle, right? But this simple cycle built billion-dollar companies and entirely shaped the modern advertising industry. Agencies supplied the exact expertise businesses demanded exactly when they needed it.
This basic expertise formula kicked off about 50 years ago, but let's fast forward to around 2005. The landscape became highly specialized. Think about it. To launch a marketing campaign back then, a business suddenly needed a graphic designer, a copywriter, a web developer, an SEO expert, a media buyer, and an email marketer. Building that entire team in-house, that was prohibitively expensive. So, hiring an agency was the obvious economic solution. Agencies essentially became the outsourced digital marketing departments for the world. But looking at where we are today, we're entering a totally new era, the AI-powered systems shift. And that's because the economics of that 2005 model have really begun to deeply fracture.
That brings us to Section 2, the linear scaling limit.
Here we run into a fundamental tension between growth and operational drag. You see, traditional agencies face a strict mathematical equation. The goal, obviously, is increasing revenue. But taking on more clients and more work requires hiring more employees, and that naturally creates more management, more overhead, more meetings, recruiting, training, and just overall operational complexity. So while your revenue increases, your costs are increasing almost in lockstep. Growth gets increasingly difficult because organizational capacity grows linearly with headcount. Put simply, it is a highly expensive way to scale a business.
And this brings us to a really critical economic truth. They aren't running out of demand, they're running into operational limits. When a traditional agency hits a plateau, it's very rarely because the market is saturated or because clients just don't need marketing anymore. It's because the internal friction of managing humans, managing labor, and managing manual processes becomes way too heavy to support further profitable expansion.
Which leads us to Section 3, 4 forces of transformation.
So, what is actively disrupting this model? Well, force 1 is that AI compresses execution. We just have to state this bluntly. Technology has completely changed how marketing gets done. Tasks that historically took hours or even days of manual human labor can now often be completed exponentially faster with AI assistance. Now, to be clear, this doesn't eliminate the need for human expertise, but it fundamentally changes the value proposition. AI is actively shifting agencies away from selling raw labor and pushing them toward delivering higher-value solutions instead.
In practical terms, AI has drastically compressed tactical executions. We're talking about things like research, first drafts, basic design, reporting, and content ideation. Because these executions are no longer incredibly time-consuming, clients are simply no longer willing to pay a massive premium just because the work used to be difficult. The commodity of basic execution has been devalued.
And that leads perfectly into forces 2 and 3. Force 2 is rising client expectations. Because basic execution is easier now, businesses are looking to pay for judgment, for strategy, integration, and actual tangible business outcomes. Force 3 is software consolidation. Look back a decade ago, and agencies had to stitch together separate, highly fragmented tools for email, CRM, landing pages, and scheduling. Today, integrated platforms combine all of those capabilities into a single, unified system. This massively reduces complexity and allows agencies to deliver their services in an entirely new way.
Finally, Force 4 is the transition toward recurring revenue. Historically, agencies relied heavily on project revenue. It's cyclical.
right? You sell, deliver, invoice, and then you have to start the whole process all over again. The value was directly tied to manual execution. But modern businesses increasingly value recurring revenue because it provides predictability and long-term planning capability. To achieve this, modern agencies are exploring software, technology licensing, and recurring technical services as a foundational part of their revenue mix, rather than just relying on one-off projects.
Let's move on to Section 4, the Marketing Operating System.
So what is the marketing operating system? It's an integrated technological infrastructure that a business actually runs on rather than just managed individual services. The next generation of agencies will not simply provide marketing. They will build systems. Just imagine the difference in that value proposition. Instead of telling a client, hey, we'll manage your marketing, you're now looking at them and saying, we will build and install the entire operating system that your business runs on. It's a massive shift.
So what exactly does that system look like? Well, it encompasses several core components, things like lead capture, a unified CRM, automated follow-up sequences, seamless appointment scheduling, consolidated recording and reviews, integrated email and SMS, and AI assistance. Software and unified systems are completely replacing the highly fragmented manual labor of the past. The agency's value has entirely shifted from completing a checklist of individual tasks to providing the core structural infrastructure of the client's business.
Which brings us to our final section, Section 5, the architecture of leverage.
Under the old way, bigger revenue strictly required bigger teams. It was a 1-to-1 ratio of growth to overhead. But the modern reality? It's about smaller teams and bigger leverage. Technology completely changes the equation here. Modern agencies are using automation to expand the sheer volume of work and infrastructure that each individual team member can oversee. And the goal isn't to replace humans. The goal is to systematically decouple business growth from headcount growth.
The agency of the future looks a lot less like a traditional creative shop and much more like a technology-enabled business. Human expertise absolutely remains essential, but it is now radically amplified by systems, automation, software, and AI. The new competitive advantage is no longer just having a room full of talented people. It's designing an organization where top-tier talent and sophisticated technology work together seamlessly. In fact, large agency groups are already investing heavily in this exact data and technology to support these highly productive new service models.
Ultimately, marketing agencies aren't disappearing, but the businesses that continue relying strictly on billable hours and manual execution are going to find growth increasingly difficult over the next decade. Those who combine strategy, technology, and recurring value are the ones who will win. Which leaves us with a final thought to ponder. The biggest question for executives today is no longer, how do I hire more people? The defining question for the next generation of business owners is simply this: how do I build a business that scales through systems as well as talent? Thank you for joining this explainer. Keep analyzing and keep optimizing.